We had a customer in Boston called EverQuote that I talked to this week. Literally hasn't done, they're an insurance company, big public company, literally has not done anything on SEO in a year and a half, and they'd grown like 118%.
The startup investment landscape is changing, and world-class companies are being built outside of Silicon Valley. We find them, talk with them, and discuss the upside of investing in them. Welcome to Upside. Woo!
Hello, and welcome to the Upside Podcast. First podcast finding upside outside of Silicon Valley. I'm Eric Hornung, and I'm accompanied by my co-host, Mr. Keyword Search himself, Jay Klaus. Jay, if you put Jay Klaus into Google, does anyone else come up?
No, I'm not aware of any other Jay Klaus other than somebody who once upon a time was advertising for a police officer opening on Craigslist, because he owns jklaus@gmail.com. And I think if you email jklaus@gmail.com, you still get an autoresponder about this open position that was posted to Craigslist.
Does that piss you off? Because I remember when we were in college, you owned Jay Klaus on every social platform. But then your Gmail was, I won't spoil it here, not jklaus@gmail.com.
Yeah, no, it does. It's the one Jay Klaus digital asset that I do not have.
If we have anyone who works at Gmail listening to this podcast, help a friend out. Let's take over jklaus@gmail.com and get it back to our friend.
Yes, let's reclaim it. But you bring up an interesting point about keyword research, Eric, because this is a recent point of pride for me. I was actually looking at some traffic graphs for my two core websites that are not Upside. And I started caring about SEO in March of 2020. And if you look at the traffic to both of those websites, it's literally an exponential growth curve from the point of actually caring about SEO.
So when you say actually caring about SEO, does that mean you just use different synonyms? Is that all it is?
No, it's like understanding a little bit about what search engines are actually looking for, especially in written posts. Because all that traffic I'm talking about is really derived from just a handful of actual articles on both sites. And so, yeah, just writing an article, knowing that, okay, I've researched the keyword that I want, and I know how to compete for that keyword with other people who have written articles on that keyword. It works. You learn the process and it works a little bit. But that is the editorial side of SEO, Eric. And there's a lot more to SEO than just the editorial side.
Like what?
Well, as we'll find out today from our guest, Geoff Atkinson, there's also a significant amount of SEO that comes down to how your site communicates with the algorithm itself. This is going to get a little technical, but Geoff Atkinson, the founder and CEO of Huckabuy, is tackling this exact problem. Huckabuy's software improves your search results, drives more organic traffic, and makes your website faster by creating Google's perfect world on your website to queue up the perfect conversation with search bots and grow your organic channel. Robots talking to robots, Eric.
How long do you think search bots live?
What is the lifespan of a search bot? I don't know. I get a ton of them.
Regardless of how long their lifespan is, I gotta believe that they want to live the one life they have the best way they can. And so they should check out our friends at Ethos Wealth Management. You can go to upside.fm/ethos to learn more.
Another way for search bots to live the one life they have the best way they can is to communicate flawlessly with the websites that they are crawling. And that is, to my understanding, exactly what Huckabuy does. And Geoff, the founder and CEO of Huckabuy, previous to this company, was the senior vice president of marketing and analytics at Overstock.com. And of all the things that Geoff did at Overstock, SEO always had a special place in his heart because apparently the return on investment for SEO was far beyond any other channel. So if there's going to be someone that's going to teach you about SEO, somebody who pioneered it and built it for Overstock.com is probably a good person to go to.
Overstock feels like one of those companies that's always kind of on the leading edge of what's happening, maybe for good reasons or maybe for bad, but I feel like they're always innovating. They were the first ones to join on Seek XR, which was on the podcast, John Chaney of Seek XR. They were the first partner there. I think in the whole blockchain cryptocurrency world, they made some of the first big retail waves there. So, hey, if you want to learn about SEO, learn from the innovators.
Huckabuy was founded in 2015. Geoff is based in Park City, Utah. We finally did it, Eric. We got into Park City, Utah.
Now we just have to get invited out there to go skiing.
Yes, I'm sure after this interview, you'll tell Geoff that we'd love to come visit and invite ourselves out there, as we tend to do with guests. They've raised about $4.3 million in funding to date. But yeah, this is one of those episodes where I think I'm going to get a little nerdy because I enjoy SEO and I know the editorial side, but the technical side evades me, especially because I'm not a developer and I'm using a lot of stuff that is kind of like out of the box tooling that often isn't super SEO friendly.
Let's see if we can change that. If you, dear listener, have any feedback on this interview, you can reach out to us at Upside FM on Twitter, or if you have something a little longer, send us a note at hello@upside.fm, and we will get to that interview right after this.
Hey listener, have you ever wanted to get a message in front of the Upside audience but weren't sure how to sponsor the show or weren't able to do a long-term sponsorship? Well, now you can just go to upside.fm/classifieds and let our audience know anything that's going on in your world, whether it's an event, an application, a special coupon or deal, or just letting them know who you are, what your company does. All you have to do is go to upside.fm/classifieds and you can place an ad on this show. That's upside.fm/classifieds.
I actually grew up in the Boston area, even though now I'm in Park City, Utah, of all places. Lived in Utah for 15 years. I was a ski racer, actually. I spent a year on the U.S. ski team and then skied in college up in New Hampshire. Came to Utah to take a job at Overstock.com. But to be honest, it was much more just to be sort of a ski bum with a real job, quote unquote, real job. So started on the ground floor at Overstock back in 2005. Overstock was just sort of a rocket ship right then. Eventually became their senior vice president over marketing. So I had quite a career at Overstock, really focused on digital marketing, but I also managed all of our analytics, like stuff from our pricing algorithm to our forecasting algorithms to even managed buying for a while. Buying raincoats on the garment district of New York City. So very diverse experience, but really my focus was digital marketing. So email, SEO, paid search, also the loyalty program, like CRM and our credit card program and our loyalty program. Always wanted to do my own thing. And so after Overstock, I took a couple of years off because it was a pretty hectic stretch there, and then founded Huckabuy. And Huckabuy actually started as a B2C play. It was sort of a comparison shopping engine affiliate model that was just a disaster. I think our largest month of revenue was like a $20 affiliate check. But we had built some really cool SEO software that people that knew me and knew the company wanted to start licensing. And so we pivoted about 4 years ago into a SaaS business. And now we're a pretty successful sort of technical SEO software business. Customers, a lot of customers, some enterprise like Salesforce and Concur and Vivint, but really help companies of all size check a lot of the big technical SEO boxes that cause growth. I learned a lot of this stuff at Overstock and how important the conversation between a website and Google is and how poorly most sites do it. And so we check most of those boxes.
We'll get to Huckabuy here in a second, but I have a couple quick follow-ups here on your story moving to Utah. When you went to Overstock, you said you got in on the ground floor and it was kind of a rocket ship at the time. So can you give me some more context of what was the state of Overstock when you joined and then what that growth looked like during your time that you were there?
Absolutely. So it was we were probably doing about $600 million a year in revenue. We had gone public. The brand of Overstock was very strong. So we figured out TV very early in the game. And TV advertisements, specifically one particular advertisement we only did for about 3 months, just made, and you guys probably remember it, the Overstock girl, and they did a Super Bowl ad and everybody all of a sudden knew of Overstock. And it was really thought of as this place that you could go for a deal where, Overstock had come into a company that had just gone bust, brought the truck, wrote a check, put everything in the back, then sorted through it and put it online. And that's really what it was like when I started. So a lot of like, hey, I know a guy that knows a guy that's got a bunch of flat screen TVs. And it was a lot of that like bada bing, bada bang, very seller, like buyer driven. It was mainly buyers with just stuff piling up in their offices. And that's kind of how it worked. And Then when I left, it was probably about a $1.3 billion company. We were very sophisticated on the supply chain side. We had about 90% of our revenue flowing through partners. So we weren't actually owning any of the inventory. When I started, I think we were probably 75% of our revenue flew through, was somehow attached to a paid channel. When I left, I'd say 60% was somehow flowing through either email marketing, loyalty program, or SEO. So it was a really drastic transformation. Probably the big product transformation. We were very much like an electronics and jewelry and watches company. When I started, when I left, they're known as a home and garden company. And that's a really interesting story. It's all based on SEO and keyword research and realizing that people really wanted to buy furniture online, but there weren't good avenues to do so. So it became a much more profitable company when I was there. It also grew obviously a lot. Kind of a whirlwind, but I wouldn't trade it for the world. It's just, can you imagine that kind of experience as your first job out of college? It's pretty rare.
Yeah. And how does a ski bum, using your words, I'm not insulting. How does a ski bum become so interested and technically established in like SEO? How did that become something that you were like, okay, I'm going to lead the charge on this?
I think it's one of those things where, you get put in a position, and if you kind of have a brain for it and you have the intellectual curiosity for it and you really enjoy it, you can learn really quickly. I also will say having a mentor helps. So Patrick Byrne, the founder and CEO of Overstock, whose dad was the CEO of Geico, his godfather was Warren Buffett. Just a crazy sort of business pedigree. To have that as your mentor after like a year and a half of being at the company certainly helped a lot. And I can't stress enough for young employees to get in at a company that's big enough that it has a lot of educational and upward momentum, and finding that mentor that cares about you and wants to see you do well and you do well for them. That's the recipe for success. But yeah, even I say like, I can't shake this SEO thing. Like I didn't intend for Huckabuy to be an SEO company. I never had my brilliant idea proved to be terribly, terribly wrong. And so, I just can't shake this SEO thing. It's just something that seems to follow me everywhere I go. Turns out that we have, fantastic technology now that we've built that really helps companies, specifically with their like communication with Google, which helps, them grow a lot. But it's not any sort of brilliant aha moment that I'm like, oh yeah, if we're going to transform the world of technical SEO. It was just sort of, it's been my path. And I think you got to be willing to pivot and take what the world gives you.
Today, there are dozens of thousands of how-to SEO YouTube videos and blogs and newsletters and whatever. So anybody can kind of learn it. I was just kind of flipping through your LinkedIn and trying to place where the timing was here. You're talking like mid 2000s. How did you had a mentor, so I get that part, but how did you actually learn SEO?
It's a funny story. So I'd never heard of it. No one at Overstock had ever heard of it in sort of like 2006. This was really sort of the Wild West times of the internet, where there's a lot of like black hat SEO and a lot of cheating of the system. So I had a fellow SVP, I wasn't an SVP at the time. Her name was Stormy Simon, and she had gone to a conference and heard a guy speak about SEO. And so I gave him a call. She had made the connection, was like, well, Geoff would probably, if anyone understood this at Overstock, it'd be Geoff, or could learn it, it's Geoff. So I gave him a call and I listened to him for like 2 hours and just asked him a bunch of questions. His name was Paul Bremer, kind of a famous SEO guy now looking back on it. And I remember like running up to Patrick's office and going to the whiteboard and being like, you have to hear this. Like, this is insane that we can do these things to change our site so that Google understands it. And we're going to rank for all these keywords and we're going to get all this free traffic. In fact, most people come through the organic links. They don't go through the paid links. We were spending like, $2 million a month or something on paid ads. And it was just sort of this aha moment. And we both were like, this is too good to be true. But the vision and his support of being able to be like, do whatever it takes for us to be good at this, and that sort of trust is really rare. Like, I think at one point we had 40 employees working on SEO and half of them were developers. Like, that's so rare for a company to have that. But with the kind of returns, I think at some point it became about a $300 million channel. We couldn't spend enough to make it look like any kind of paid channel. It's just so efficient. So Paul really taught us. We actually brought him to Utah. He was in San Diego and he came to Utah. I think it was like 4 days a week, took a plane, came here. But basically it was like class. We'd go to class with Paul a lot. and hired some smart people. No one really knew SEO then. So to find an SEO expert was almost impossible. You had to take smart people and educate them. And that's really what we did. So, and we got so sophisticated and so deep into it that we went down some of the black hat paths. I mean, here's a story. We got banned from Google for 6 months. I mean, you banned a $200 million channel, you know, as the VP of marketing, you're in a lot of trouble. But we just pushed the envelope, like as far as you could push it. And it's really rare. I don't know of anyone that's had that kind of SEO experience of like literally never heard of anything to full bore for 5 years, everything you can possibly do. So, you know, it's hard not to learn a lot when you go through that experience.
Besides the number of people talking about SEO now, how is SEO different today versus when you were doing it from 2006 to 2010?
It's a lot different today. It's all driven by Google, right? So if you look at even like search results today and how they look and how users interact with search results today, it's very, very different. And what Google wants out of a website. Say one of the biggest changes is like development of JavaScript, which is now used all around the internet, is sort of Google's nemesis. And so for years, you just hear like, well, we have to crawl what the user sees. We're not, you know, there's no tricking them. And now Google says, well, give us an alternate version of the site, the same content, but no JavaScript, so we can actually crawl the thing. Like that's a huge change. The technical side of SEO has gotten very sophisticated with the introduction of structured data, which is this language that allows a site to actually authoritatively communicate. So they're not just guessing through HTML and all this stuff. You can actually tell them this is a person, this is a product in a very structured way, and they leverage that and not just learn more, but can actually use that information to display in their results. So it's changed a lot. One thing that hasn't changed is that SEO is a very snake oil salesman type business. It's a huge business, like 80 billion, and it's almost entirely dominated by what they call services, so agencies primarily. And the SEO services industry has an NPS score, a net promoter score of zero. So, I mean, you guys have been in the business long enough. You've probably, that's hard. It's hard to get a zero. Like you have to really try. And the reason is the disconnect between what companies want and the providers that are trying to provide for them. An agency can't do SEO well for a company. Internal people write content. You can't have an agency write great content for you. All the technical stuff, an agency is an outsourced agency. They don't even have these technical assets. So there's this friction there that's been there forever. And I don't know why I do know why it exists, but I don't know why it never was fixed. And that's really one of the intentions of Google is of Huckabuy is to say, that's a problem, right? This is an industry that needs to be shaken up. This is an industry that needs to be fixed. And so we approach it in a much more non-snake oil. You know what you're getting. We're transparent. We want to show you. And we almost have to do that to a fault because the industry is it's really got a bad name. And I know you guys probably have had experiences where you've talked to people like, oh yeah, I've gotten burned by this company. And like, I don't even know why we spend on this anymore.
I think it's just because SEO feels unrelatable to people who don't understand it. It's so much so that it feels like magic, like this magic problem solving thing. And so it's like, well, if somebody else has cracked the code for this magic problem solving thing, I'll pay them to solve the problem. But then I have these expectations of I need like immediate results, and I don't understand how long it can take to ramp these things up. I'm much more familiar in the world of like content creation for SEO, which is very different from a typical e-commerce website. So what does SEO look like in the world of e-commerce at Overstock or some of the clients that you're working with now?
Yeah, it's all about scale. So, when you get into an Overstock type world or an Amazon, you're talking tens of millions of pages. And so you can't write, really sophisticated pieces of content on tens of millions of pages like you can in sort of B2B world or traditional content marketing. I mean, we did have a ton of copywriters, don't get me wrong, like that would just write, for almost like the sake of writing, but you just needed to have content. But it's all about scale and user-generated feedback. So reviews are very important. Reviews are a huge aspect of e-commerce success. But also take, for example, like page speed. Page speed is something that scales across an entire website. Page speed's becoming one of the, if not the most important ranking factors there is. And you don't solve that page to page to page. You have to do it on your tech stack and how you're delivering pages across an entire site. So with the bigger companies, especially e-commerce, real estate, the stock type, Yahoo Finance, those huge sites, it's all about ideas and implementing things at a scale that you don't have to manage every single page. You have content flowing through, ideally not by you, but by users. And all the boxes are checked when a page loads. Like there's structured data, there's good metadata, there's plenty of content, the images load fast, the page loads fast. You're trying to just check every box and have it checked across the entire site. Whereas with a content strategy, right, that's a much different sort of SEO task. Now, a lot of those technical things still are important, and you need to be able to deliver the content in a way that Google understands and in a quick and timely fashion. But it's a different, like now with Huckabuy doing B2B marketing, it's a much different task than it was at Overstock. There's a lot of the same principles, but in terms of what you need in terms of talent and what you need from a day-to-day production standpoint, it's just a different beast.
Take me through the pivot. So you have this B2C affiliate, I think you use the word disaster, and you decide to pivot to an SEO software as a service style business. Take me through like the intellectual decision behind that, but also the emotional and running the company.
Yeah, there wasn't a ton of intellect behind it. It was much more, we're not making any money and we have to do something. I'll tell you, this is to show you how ignorant I was at the time. I didn't even realize the value of a SaaS company. Like I didn't know about annual recurring revenue and that got you a higher, multiple, and that investors like don't even invest in a lot of B2C concepts anymore. They only invest in SaaS. Like I had no idea. It wasn't part of the decision. I didn't even know that, like why all of a sudden investors were interested in Huckabuy. And they're like, well, it's a thing called annual recurring revenue and it compounds. And they walk me through all the numbers like, wow, that's great. And in fact, even after we did our first round of funding, our SaaS metrics, which I didn't even know, like I still have struggled with SaaS metrics. They're like, your SaaS metrics are amazing. Like your cost per new customer is so low. And like we did it all kind of accidentally. But as a founder, it's chasing a revenue stream and chasing, I think like that first chunk of money that people are willing to pay you for any idea is sort of a founder's first obligation, is to go out and try to make something that people will pay for. And I hadn't done that in the original Huckabuy model. But the fact that people were asking me to license technology that we had on Huckabuy.com and pay me, like I would just make up numbers and be like, I don't know, $2,000 a month. And they'd be like, yeah, great. And that's how like our pricing model got started. It was just like, what sounds good, right? What seems like a reasonable amount? And it was purely that, Eric. And then from an emotional perspective, the early days are stressful. They're very stressful. I don't think anybody can describe how, especially if you're struggling and you're doing a lot of it out. Like I financed Huckabuy for the first couple of years. There's nothing coming in. There's a lot going out. It's just kind of, I think of it as like an endurance sport. It's endurance and the willingness to sort of not think of yourself as a genius in any way, shape, or form and being like, my idea was terrible. I need to pivot into something different. People seem to be liking this. Let's see how much they like it and go down that path. So I think humility, is sort of like the realization that and the other thing that they don't tell you, you can go from a SVP of Overstock with hundreds of employees and assistants and all these like special perks to like nothing. Like you're putting together IKEA furniture in the office. And that's very humbling. And I think you just have to be quite humble. You have to be confident, but you also have to be quite humble about how am I going to get from zero to something that's like people are paying for.
What did the actual technology that you had built for Huckabuy, like what did you build and why did you build it? And then also, it seems like it's behind the scenes. How did people realize that was something that they could license? Like how did they know it was something that they even wanted?
Well, the original vision for Huckabuy, which I actually think is a good vision, but it takes a lot of money and it's actually kind of available out there now, was a comparison shopping engine that was agnostic, meaning you didn't have to pay us to be on us. We put every product on the site, and we also do the coupon calculations, because there's this behavior for users, at least at the time, where first you search based on price, then you start searching for coupon codes, and you're trying to, and then half of them don't work, and then you're doing this mental math, and you're trying to calculate tax and shipping and all. It's just like a real pain. It's gotten better now. Some of these apps that allow you to just like search, it'll just show you the coupons as you go. So it's kind of a big data problem, but it was a pure SEO play. Like, we had millions of pages. We were trying to, really build up content. Anyways, but we had built this little tool that was a really efficient way to generate content. We called it Huck News. And you'd grab an Instagram post and you just grab the link, drop it in like the bottom of like a category page. So say the page is about skis, you'd grab like Rosignol's sick, Instagram post, drop it, and then you'd write a little comment, like a paragraph. And so instead of having to write an article or a description, you could literally write, for a minute, 2 minutes, and there was a fresh piece of content on the page. And then it would do that across multiple pages, and it was an efficient way for the pages to be changing in a meaningful enough way that Google would pay attention. And it worked. And that was the first piece of software. We don't even use it anymore. It's not in our product stack, but that was the first piece that people wanted to license. They wanted the Huck News feature to put on the bottom of their category pages, or whatever page they were interested in ranking in. So it was a very simple, basic tool that allowed them to get going. And then now it's, evolved into a much more complicated product that I think we have like one legacy customer that uses Huck News, but it's not any of our revenue.
Tell me about that new product. What is Huckabuy?
So Huckabuy is really 3 products, and they check some really big, so I think of our business as just listening to what Google really wants out of a website and where they're going, and providing that for them. So there's really 3 products. The first one was structured data, which we touched on a little bit earlier. It's this very powerful language that allows them to understand. So we fully automate that, and that was our first real product. The second is something called dynamic rendering, which is, we also touched on this, which is the JavaScript issue, where you can now actually create a copy of a site that's perfect for Google. And we do a partnership with Cloudflare that hosts all that content version, or that pure HTML version, at edge across the world. So when Google comes to crawl your site, they get exactly what they want, and the pages load in like 100 milliseconds, and they just can download the whole site right away. And then the third product is a page speed product. So page speed, there's a huge Google algorithm update coming in May of 2021. It's called the Page Experience Update. And it's basically going to slap all sites that are slow and give them a penalty, and they won't rank anymore. Google's just fed up with slow websites. So we actually built a product specific for that. So if you do those 3 things, they're hard to do internally, all of them. Like, fixing your own page speed is a hard tech task. And if you do those 3 things, you're going to be, successful at SEO. They especially help companies that care and are writing content and doing other things. That just really amplifies all those efforts. So that's where we're at today. We're kind of give Google the perfect version. People spend a lot of time on the UI UX for humans, and we spend a lot of time on the UI UX for Google.
We talked a little bit earlier about SEO agencies and the snake oil salesman vibe. And as someone who's worked with companies on hiring SEO agencies, a lot of times it's the company's fault as well. Mm-hmm. They go out, they hire this, and they expect it, kind of like Jay said, they expect the magic to be magical. And what they don't realize is that there's actually a lot of work behind it. So in a press release that I read about you guys, it said that the average customer using Huckabuy's software experiences a 62% growth in organic search visits 12 months after partnering. How magical is that versus how much work is that customer putting in?
I'd say it actually is. I don't like to call it magical, perhaps. Like, you guys can hear what we're doing, and it does take a lot of work. We just did it for you. And that's what SaaS is all about, right? So it's not so magical, but you can install us and do nothing else and grow very significantly. Like, we had a customer in Boston called EverQuote that I talked to this week. Literally hasn't done, they're an insurance company, big public company, literally has not done anything on SEO in a year and a half, and they'd grown like 118%. And that's just Huckabuy talking to bots and giving them a great experience. And so that, that's why I don't really love to call it magical, but it is sort of. It's like there hasn't been an SEO solution that you can buy off the shelf, install it, and get those kinds of numbers. This is the first one. And that's what I've been trying to build. That's why our first iterations of the product were purely on performance. There's a ton of SEO analytical tools like SEMrush and Moz that tell you how you're doing. I'm like, we don't care about that. We care about the needle moving and results moving. I think that focus on that really makes us pretty unique.
When you say you can just install it, what type of customer are you typically working with? Like, is this a WordPress plugin, or you work with people who have custom coded everything and now we have to actually integrate and implement this? What does that look like?
It's a pretty wide array of there's a lot of different types of customers, a lot of e-commerce, a lot of B2B in particular. B2B has a very hard time communicating with Google because it's not a product page of a watch or something. It's very complicated. Usually the B2B world is very heavy on WordPress. The B2C world is much more like Salesforce Commerce Cloud or Shopify. And the integration point is at your CDN level. And I don't want to get too technical here, but it's sort of like if you use Cloudflare, for example, you can use Huckabuy's API and you can get all three products, with an API token on Cloudflare. If you're Shopify, you have to do something called an O2O solution, which is a Cloudflare to Cloudflare solution. So it's done at the CDN level, unless you're using just the structured data. But at the end of the day, Huckabuy ends up delivering the site with us and Cloudflare end up delivering the site both for bots and for users. And we put our, page speed improvements and all our structured data and our dynamic rendering. So the delivery of the site, not the compiling, meaning like the tech stack and what you're calling to build the site, but the delivery of the site is done at edge by Huckabuy and Cloudflare. So it's done at the CDN level. Sorry to get sort of techie there.
Jay, you know how like sometimes we have finance people on the show and you're just like, I have no idea what's happening right now?
Yes.
That's how I feel right now. And I can feel you just loving this.
I love it. So I would call myself moderately techie. I'm going to give you kind of a use case. Like, I build my websites in WordPress. I do have Cloudflare in the mix for some reason because I paid someone to help me with my page speed. Do I need to be more techie to implement Huckabuy? Or do I need an IT professional? Do you guys do that for the business owner? What does that look like?
No. If you have Cloudflare at all, it's literally a flip of the switch. And if you don't have Cloudflare and you're using some other technology or ideally not using a CDN, you actually use Huckabuy's enterprise license of Cloudflare. And now you're part of a larger group of customers that not only get the benefit of Huckabuy, but now you actually get a Cloudflare license as well. So you're getting the benefit. The change for a non-Cloudflare customer is a DNS change. So if you can make a DNS change at 11 p.m., be kind of waiting for the site to refresh for a minute, then no problems.
I'm very intrigued. Do people typically buy like a bundle of these things? Is this 3 separate subscriptions to Huckabuy? What does that look like?
Most customers use all 3 because they are powerful and they work well together. Some customers, the only product that usually stands on its own is the structured data product because it was the first product. It's a different integration point there. So the structured data is actually, if you just start using structured data, it's a JavaScript install it delivers a little JSON LD packet of information that sort of sits at the top of the page. Bot comes in, they hit all the structured data so they understand the page, even before they've crawled it. But most customers, fortunately, they want to use all 3. They see the benefit, they get the results. Page speed's the newest. It's still in beta, but who doesn't want fast page speed? And especially because it's our first sort of not just SEO product, because companies want page speed that just have huge marketing budgets and they care about conversion rate and they care about their relevancy ad scores and all these things. So Facebook helps your Facebook ads if you have fast page speed. So, but most customers use all 3. You get a discount if you do, and they help each other. So why not, sort of throw the kitchen sink at it? And it's a tough problem. So if you can throw the kitchen sink at it, why wouldn't you do it?
How does pricing compare between Huckabuy and hiring an agency?
It's usually quite a bit cheaper. So our pricing usually ranges on the low end, about like $1,500 a month. And that's sort of for like SMB, but cares a lot about SEO. On the enterprise side, it can go upwards of 10. But I think our average customer pays us about $3,800 a month, maybe a little less than that. So it's not cheap. It's not like just a little app that you turn on and pay $5 a month, but considering what the sort of results you get, and if you're doing a lot of other marketing activities and you have like any kind of marketing budget, it's probably reasonable.
Who's the champion inside the business? Like, who's the buyer?
Usually it's usually coming from marketing. It's usually like an SEO person that sort of gets this technical side. Like a Jay, I can see him like, yeah, this makes sense. Someone like that. Oftentimes it will end up being a developer though. That's like, these are really hard problems and this company can just this actually takes a lot off my plate. And if it's reliable and safe and secure, then this is a great solution. But usually we enter through marketing, and then we always have to have a tech conversation, which can go either way. They either go like, this is, we just don't know them and this is a huge, change, or they're like, this makes a ton of sense. And we're getting a lot better. One of our biggest focuses right now is getting better selling into IT. So we thought of ourselves as definitely a marketing company, but now as the product's evolved and we're much more at like the CDN level, we're having to sell a lot more into IT. And IT doesn't really like to be sold into. So it's much more of like, we have a whole developers section of our website that's being built and trying to communicate on that level. So yeah, that's usually how it goes.
What are your cost drivers in this? I imagine the technology is probably pretty minimal unless there's a ton of data being delivered here that's running up a bill. Is it mostly people?
It's all people. Yeah. I mean, it's a very minimal cost. It's a nice SaaS model. It's all people.
How big is your team at this point?
21.
Dang. What are they doing?
Basically 3 groups, kind of 4 groups. So development, engineering is probably about a third. Sales is probably another third. And then we have a marketing team of 4, including me, and a support team of 2. So that's kind of the breakdown today.
Are you guys hiring?
We are. Mm-hmm. Sales is the focus on hiring. We feel like we kind of got off, the early stage of Huckabuy. It's hard not to have services involved, especially with my background. People would just naturally ask for help. And so we would toss it in. We would say, okay, you'll pay us $3,000 a month, but you get to meet with us once a month or something like that. And and it was just an easy way, and it was asked for a lot. And so we had to be really disciplined last year in particular to get off of that model and say, we have a support desk now, and you call them if something happens. And then if you want something else, you buy if you really just have to have your keyword research coming from Huckabuy, you can buy that a la carte. But we've really gotten away from that. And so it used to be, it's just hard. The services were a decent chunk. And I think early stage startups, it's important to have that services front because you get an opportunity to talk to your customer. The product might not be all that sophisticated yet. And so you're adding some other things in. Now we've kind of gotten really down to the pure SaaS model. And that takes a little bit of a transition, but we've done it. And now, setting into 2021, that's the model.
With the price tag you're talking about, people paying monthly for this, and also just the naturally slow results of seeing Google reward you, what do you guys point to in the immediate term as like, this is working? Is it just the metrics of like your site health and your page speed?
It's a great question, and one that we talk about a lot, actually. So it's about showing that the product is doing what they bought, like what we told them it would do, and they bought. So usually the first thing that'll happen is like their crawl stats. How well is Google getting through the site and downloading information? They'll just spike up. A page speed's very easy because it's an on-off. And so you can look beforehand, here's your scores. Afterhand, here's your scores. And so that's a really easy one. Structured data takes a long time though. And that was being our first product. We had to do long-term contracts, which is never easy. And you don't realize the results at 3 months. I say customers like us at 6 months. They love us at 12 months. And so it's really important to get to them to that stage, regardless of the product, because it is SEO. If you get to 12 months, the result, you get 62%. Some of these companies are getting insane results. When you get there, then that's sort of the aha, okay, we're going to keep going with these guys moment. But something that we've had to really focus on, because it's not like an email marketing solution or, all of a sudden just the bells and whistles are nice enough. Like it's a lot of under the hood. You're not actually, watching the bots come in and crawl. But we do have a nice dashboard that sort of shows all these statistics now, but it was a struggle early. And it sort of continues to be one, something that we really have to pay attention to.
Are contracts like a minimum 12 months in length then, or is it month to month and someone can just phase out early on?
Almost all the contracts are 12 months. The page speed, though, we've just offered, because it's so easy for us to turn a customer on, there's a 30-day free trial that you can do with that. And we've done some shorter contracts around the page speed product where they really want to invest in it, but they want some sort of an out if it just doesn't do what it's supposed to do, which I don't blame them for doing. So those have gotten, page speed is just a little bit different because not everybody's just purely focused on SEO. So that's allowed us to kind of shorten some stuff up and get more people in the door.
With the range in prices, is that based on usage or size of the website? How do you price that?
It's usually based on number of pages indexed. So how many pages on the site, and then how frequently do you want those pages refreshed? So the caching and the dynamic rendering and the page speed takes processing time for us. So if you want it done weekly, if you want it done daily, if you want it done monthly, those are variants that they can select.
Damn, I love this model, and I love that you've positioned yourself as kind of a premium solution for like enterprise customers. Because you could say like, I'm going to appeal to 1 million J's who can only afford like a couple $100 a month. And I imagine you made the intentional decision at one point that that's not what you're going to do. Because I'm sitting here, I'm like, I want this, but that's not something I can do as a blogger, So how did you guys decide the market for this?
Pretty intentional to go up market versus down. I think it's because usually companies with more money also have a higher domain authority. And domain authority, like Google has to care about your site for us to work well. Like if you're just a brand new site, you can turn Huckabuy on and off and nothing will happen. But if you have a domain authority of like 75 and you turn Huckabuy on, you're going to see an impact. And so I think who was successful and who we drove the most ROI for lent us to say we're going to go more enterprise because they're just going to get a much bigger lift. And for them, $4,000 or $5,000 a month to solve these problems is like a no-brainer. We'll see how that pans out, right? We're pretty young. I think at some point we're going to have a self-serve option. Actually, I know we're going to have a self-serve option sometime in 2021. That is a freebie, and it is for Jays. Literally, it's also a very marketing driven tactic of getting that trust within the development community, getting that trust within like, okay, you want to try it? Go for it, try it. You're probably going to hit capacity in like a month. So then so that's sort of on our roadmap for sure in 2021. But I think early with limited resources, we were like, where's the best bang for the buck? Where can we really make an impact? And it was going more enterprise.
Well, you've got a beta customer right here.
All right. Let me know we'll put you on the list.
Let me know when that's out.
That'd be great.
How many active customers you guys have right now? And then like how long is the sales funnel for those customers?
So I think we're in the 60s, somewhere around like 65, maybe we've cracked 70. So 60s, 70s. Sales cycle is 8 weeks. So relatively short, which is nice. Although we closed the deal this week that took 2 years. So,
I saw on Crunchbase that you guys had raised some money. With this type of contract, seems like you probably could have bootstrapped or continued to self-finance. How did you make that decision?
We did. We bootstrapped for a long time, which I thought was really healthy because maybe not healthy for me personally financially, but healthy for Huckabuy. It meant that we did have to really care about, we don't have a culture that's like ping pong tables and foosball tables. Like that's not us. And I think, we have nice space, but we're frugal. And I think that's going to stick, it's just going to stick with us forever. The decision to bring on money was really almost like a personal connection with me and the Diogo, who is the partner at Album Ventures. We had, almost like a bromance for like 3 years. And I was really against venture capital money for a number of reasons. I'd seen a lot of founders getting ripped off. I'd seen them like rip their companies away from them. There's a lot of bad stories out there, but I really trusted Diogo, and he's lived up to what he said he was going to do. We kind of achieved that product market fit, and it was time to put the pedal to the metal. Now, I actually don't know if like we haven't achieved all the things that we wanted to achieve after we've gotten that money. And so our burn rate has gone up, which drives me crazy. And, but you got to, at some point with a software company, you can't have it be like a personal brand, that you like to go skiing in the morning, and then work on it for a few hours and then go, out to dinner. Software companies have a finite window that you have to take advantage of. And like how fast competition has jumped into our space is like mind boggling. We were like the first ones, and now there's like a bunch of companies that are doing this. So you really do have to move quickly. Time is of the essence. And we felt like we had found the right partner in Album and Kickstart, that they were going to be very supportive, but not trying to change the culture or change the vision or how we went about business. I mean, Diogo says to me, you can do whatever you want with this. If you want to sell it tomorrow, I'll just be happy for you. Like, I won't get the return that I wanted, but that's fine. So there was a level of trust there and a personal relationship. And it was so different than all the other VCs that we had talked to, that he really just cared about Huckabuy and me. And that's really what drove it, was just finding the right partner. And I think that's something missing in VC world, where you're out just getting term sheets. You do need that sort of partners, because you're in it for the long haul. They're not going anywhere. They're here to stay. So I think that's an important step that I think we did it right.
I hope you're still getting some time to get out there and ski, even if it's not every morning. But this has been awesome. If people want to find out more about you or Huckabuy, where should they go?
Just go to huckabuy.com. If you come in and fill out a contact us form and mention the podcast in particular, you get a nice discount. I think we give like 20% off for podcast listeners. Podcast listeners, by the way, it's been a great marketing channel for us that I never, thank God for Finn. Like, I never would have thought of podcasting as an awesome marketing channel, but it's just been tremendous. And podcast listeners, because they learn about the product and learn about me when they come in, it's just really refreshing to have that type of person reaching out. So we take care of podcast listeners really well.
Your next product needs to be SEO for podcasts for discovery. And maybe we'll break out the checkbook for that.
So Finn, our marketing manager, who I know you know, he is all about podcasts and is pushing me actually in that direction. So you might be pleasantly surprised on that front.
All right, Eric, we just spoke with Geoff Atkinson, the founder and CEO of Huckabuy. Do you feel like you understand SEO better now?
Better? Yeah, I'll take better. I have like the vague outlines of what SEO does. And I think this was very helpful in explaining the concepts like in a way that I could understand it without it being too technical to the place that I felt lost. Because this is, as you know, Jay, this isn't a place that I hang out frequently.
This is super interesting to me because, kind of as I said in the intro, editorially, I feel like I understand SEO. I understand like how to write the article in a way that is answering a question. But there's so much that goes into Google actually understanding that that is true that I don't understand and I haven't optimized for because I don't know how. And if Huckabuy really is this easy implementation, flip of a switch, and we're going to make your website communicate that much better with Google, that seems like magic to me, frankly.
When we were younger, we practiced basketball in this old gym, and you'd get into the gym and it'd be freezing cold, and you go back to this huge electrical box switch and you'd flip the lights on, and then for the next 5 to 7 minutes, the lights would slowly turn on. And when you said flip a switch, that's how I pictured Huckabuy. You flip the switch and the switch has been flipped and you are now expecting light to be present, but it's going to take a little bit of time no matter what. But once those lights are on, I was draining threes. Just no big deal.
Yes, we know that once upon a time you could dunk a basketball.
Yeah, I couldn't shoot threes though. That was a lie.
Well, what was really interesting to me in this conversation was their target audience here. Because if this is something that works as seamlessly and as quickly as they say it is, there are a lot of people who would want to invest in this, but they're very explicitly marketing this towards a higher end, bigger budget type of customer. And I'm trying to think about how I feel about that. Personally, as a blogger, I feel sad. But as someone looking at this as a business opportunity, I think I'm on board with it. What did you think about that?
I think if they go to my basketball analogy, if they go to a lower pay, this is a good analogy, Jay.
It just continues. Okay, go on.
Okay.
I'll play it out.
I'm not going to keep on going down the metaphor, but I'm talking about the fact that you turn something on and then you don't see results immediately. And I think that if you go to a lower tier in terms of price customer, you're going to see significantly higher churn because the cost of doing something and trying it is so low that you're going to try something out and you're not going to see a change in 1, 2, 3 months. And you're going to say, well, why am I paying this recurring cost? But for these larger customers, they're thinking about things in terms of years or 3-year forecasts or 5-year forecasts. So if it takes a little longer, they're probably a little bit less likely to churn off the platform quickly because they just have a longer timeline. They're not thinking month to month.
There was a meme going around on Twitter last week where basically an agency owner said $500 client, and it had this big long paragraph about like, prove your ROI. I'm just trying to make sure that this is actually making sense and that this is a good investment for me. And then below that it said $50,000 client, money sent, thanks. Which like is obviously kind of tongue in cheek, but also really true in some ways. For if you go up market, the clients typically understand how things work better, and they do a better job of evaluating up front, and they aren't so ticky-tacky about the specifics because they know that on a large scale, this will be worthwhile. And that's kind of how I'm thinking about this too, because you could probably go to a bunch of people like me, but because, as you in your basketball analogy says, because it operates slowly, we're going to be asking ourselves month to month, am I seeing the return? If this is a big item in my budget, relatively speaking, I'm going to put a lot of pressure on that, and I'm going to be really on top of it and just like almost white knuckle, just waiting to see the results. So that's why I think this makes some sense. And given Geoff's background, having done this for Overstock.com and the scale that they were doing, I'm sure that a lot of this is born out of that personal experience, and it's developed for that type of customer anyway.
And that goes back to Geoff as a founder, which is something we try to address on this kind of deal memo. We love the idea of founders who start on second base, Jay. And I mean, this is that in spades.
See, the problem is now you're mixing a baseball with a basketball metaphor, and it's getting muddy.
I also threw some cards in there. Yeah.
Geoff, as a founder, though, he came in extremely humble, talking about how his first product that he was trying to build actually was a spectacular failure, I think, to use his words, but at least embodying what he was saying. What was really interesting to me about the story, though, was out of that failure came a little piece of code and technology that people could publicly see that they really wanted, and that became Huckabuy, which really speaks to, I think, the pain point of what some of these people in this world are feeling and how impactful small improvements can be on a really large scale in terms of traffic and conversion and things like this. So kudos to him for identifying that. He also talked about being bootstrapped for a really long time and this coming out of his own pocket to develop this company for a while. And that's something we like to see on this show too, because obviously he was forced to be capital efficient, but also his big priority was finding clients, making sales. Like, it's obvious that this guy has a salesman mindset and heart too, which is something that I love to see in a founder.
I have a dumb question. So my understanding of SEO is that like there's something that Google wants you to see. There's something that Google wants you to do. There's something that Google wants you to write or show. And if you do that right thing, then you can rank high. But at the same time, there's all of these people trying to do what Google wants. So is Google changing its preferences over time? Why does more than one SEO agency exist if there is a right answer?
Yes. And the thing is, Google doesn't have a complete outline of how their rankings work. A lot of the algorithm is assumed and guessed upon. We don't know how things are weighted. So agencies have their own opinions and they have their own formulas that they've seen success with. But to me, the best advice I've ever been given on this front was basically Google is going to, over time, just get better and better at giving the best result to the question that you're asking. And as a human, when we search for something and we look at the results, we can very quickly tell which result is better than others. And Google is just trying to replicate that experience. It used to be that you could literally just cram a bunch of the keyword into the HTML on the page. And Google's like, well, it's all over this page. This must be the right answer. And they've gotten better at figuring out, okay, that's not actually the signal. A better signal, for example, is if a lot of other websites are linking to this website saying this is an authority. So as time goes on, you can try to play games with the algorithm all you want. Ultimately, the best response, the best resource, the most valued answer to a question is going to be what floats to the top.
What if every website turned on Huckabuy at the exact same time? Who would win?
It probably wouldn't really change much what is already sitting there. Like, to me, editorial is what's going to drive the majority of the results, especially if that plays out and other authoritative websites say, like, this is the best article on this topic. And Huckabuy is like, now we're going to give it this extra layer of juice. Like, Google's going to say, not only is this the best answer, but we see this as a really quick page. It loads the way we want. It looks great on mobile. It will penalize existing sites that are getting ranked well, but that don't render quickly or display well on mobile. So to me, this is like the 20 of the 80-20 in my mind. And Geoff would probably disagree and wouldn't love that. But to me, that's how I think about this.
So, said another way, answering my question a different way, does that mean that a large benefit, editorial staying the same, a large benefit of Huckabuy is that your competitors don't have it?
Yes, but also I'm really speaking from the lens of editorial-based content. Overstock was e-commerce. I don't actually know how ranking happens for product search results because that's harder to quantify. It sounds like a lot of it is like reviews based. And I don't know how much more difficult it is to render those pages that are mobile friendly and quickly the way that Google wants. I don't know. I would imagine there are a lot of products that get placed high on the search results that are not necessarily better products that are ranking lower because the store itself might have some credibility, and that's probably drawing a lot of the search volume. Whereas if you have a much better product, I don't know how you overtake that without getting a ton of sales and a ton of reviews. So I don't know. I mean, at the end of the day, like, if you're playing at the scale of Overstock and you're competing constantly with Wayfair and Amazon and Walmart, these types of optimizations are probably really important because you've probably done all the easier stuff that you can.
And that's, I think what I'm trying to get to is Huckabuy is a competitive advantage, but in a limited market where there's only 5 market participants, it's the most competitive advantage if only one of them has it. And if all 5 of them have it, it becomes not a competitive advantage, but maybe it becomes table stakes. I don't know. I'm just trying to understand the SEO market better. I know that there's a million creative agencies. That's not a real number, but there's a million creative agencies around the country that do this to some standard, some way. So it's a super fractured space and it's large, right? If we're thinking about our total addressable market and analysis, is it really even worth digging into a number? It's big enough.
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, if it's something where you are Overstock and you are competing with Target, Wayfair, Amazon, Walmart, I'm just guessing at some of these big players here, but you suddenly see that, well, I used to be ranked number 2 for a lot of these search terms. Now I'm number 3. And you figure out, oh, it's because they have dialed in a lot of the technical level, like the edge results from their CDN. I'm just throwing buzzwords out now. You'll think, okay, how do I do that? I need to do that. And maybe Huckabuy is the kind of de facto go-to answer for that.
In which case, is this a better opportunity or a worse opportunity?
I think better, because it is going to improve those websites. And the alternative is, like, at some point, it becomes a priority for these big companies anyway, I would think. You know, he mentioned that Overstock, they had a very large team with a lot of developers working on SEO. And if implementing Huckabuy saves a significant cost of doing this custom and hoping that you do it as well as a team that is doing this full time for a bunch of customers, then it seems like a good opportunity to me.
I love that. It also, from Huckabuy's perspective, makes them hyper reliant on Huckabuy going forward, which is a good thing for Huckabuy and probably a win-win situation for the company. It also gets to what I want to see in the next 6 to 12 months, which is, he mentioned a new Google rollout happening in March. I'd just love to see how customers react to Huckabuy's ability to update what needs to be updated based on this new Google rollout. I've heard of just horror stories from these Google rollouts that sites go down, sites change just because some little technical thing was off. So if Huckabuy's mitigating that risk as well as increasing search traffic, that to me says there's some stickiness here.
I don't have a better thing to look for. I could go back to my old mainstay of revenue. I mean, I want to look at what clients are attracting and what new partners they're bringing on to see if they keep climbing the ladder in terms of clout in that realm. This seems to me like it has the opportunity to be an acquisition target. If one of these companies is saying like, well, the competitive advantage is to have this and not let my other competitors have it, it seems to me like that might be something that someone like an Overstock might want to acquire to make their in-house competitive advantage, which I think is worth thinking about in terms of an outcome for this if we're investing in it.
I'm really looking forward to seeing revenue. Dear listener, if you have enjoyed this episode, please leave us a rating on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to your podcast. You can reach out to us on Twitter at UpsideFM or send us something a little longer at hello@upside.fm, and we will talk to you next week.
That's all for this week. Thanks for listening. We'd love to hear your thoughts on today's guest, so shoot us an email at hello@upside.fm or find us on Twitter at UpsideFM. We'll be back here next week at the same time talking to another founder in our quest to find upside outside of Silicon Valley. If you or someone you know would make a good guest for our show, please email us or find us on Twitter and let us know. And if you love our show, please leave us a review on iTunes. That goes a long way in helping us spread the word and continue to help bring high-quality guests to the show. Eric and I decided there were a couple things we wanted to share with you at the end of the podcast, and so here we go. Eric Hornung and Jay Klaus are the founding parties of the Upside podcast. At the time of this recording, we do not own equity or other financial interest in the companies which appear on this show. All opinions expressed by podcast participants are solely their own opinion and do not reflect the opinions of Duff & Phelps LLC and its affiliates, Unreal Collective LLC and its affiliates, or any entity which employ us. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon as a basis for investment decisions. We have not considered your specific financial situation nor provided any investment advice on this show. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next week.
Never mind, bro, that can't be matched. I'm lighting it on fire, used to run victory laps, and still I'm not even tired. It's all about the timing, yeah, that's what they say. Well, I'ma keep on rhyming.